1, 2. Oh yeah. Oh my God. So try to find a seat. We want to start at 3 promptu, as not to drag it out longer than, or not as long as last time anyway. So if you find a seat here on those tables, that would be fantastic. And it gives us an overview of whether or not we need more tables to be brought here. All right, so if you want to be part of our brainstorming discussions particularly, we have materials placed on the tables that help us with that. Come on in and fill in, and then we can start at 3 promptu. Thank you. One, two, three, here we go. Kia ora everybody again. Thank you for braving the dismal conditions out there to be here with us today. As I said, we're going to make a start punctu at 3 o'clock to not drag it out too long thereafter. So I will give you a brief overview of what we're doing, but first again just a reminder of why we're here. This is why we're here, right? We're here because we're aware of the fact that we're living in a time, in a very privileged time really, in a time where in our lives nothing has ever been normal, because normal was down here, right? When things were normal, when things were in balance. All our lives were somewhere here along this graph where things got completely out of balance, right? That's why we're here. So we're recognizing that, because when you go out there and you're on the ocean and you want to catch a fish, this is a very, very unnormal day, because you're looking at an ocean that looks very, very different from the one that was here. Very, very different, right? It may seem normal to you, and why don't we carry on? And so I got a snapper, right? But it is very, very, very different actually, and many people recognize that. And if those trends that we see here continue, then it will be not looking very good. So I think we're here, and around the world, people are actually realizing what this time is like in which we are, and that's why we need to come together to look for better ways for a better future. And so I put you also in contact with this picture again that I had last time, very briefly. This is sort of the view that got us into the trouble where we are, I think. And I think this is a view that would not have gotten us into the trouble. And so if we reflect back to where we might want to go, I think the future will look a bit more like this if we want to have a future that is healthy and holistic and gives us a planet that supports our life further. So that's where things are going in a way, of recognizing that we are not dominant of this place. If we think we are, we're going to wreck it. But that we are part of this wonderful net of life, and we have to support it, then it will support us. If we don't do this, not so good. So that's why we're here. So today we have a brief introduction with two speakers who will tell us a bit about things that are of importance in this space of marine protection. Can we turn it down a little bit? And so we have first a brief presentation on the just released Revitalizing the Gulf report by the government. That was released just after our last hui, so it was kind of timely that we had this hui and now we got this paper. And Barry Weber will tell us a little bit about it, what this means. Barry was involved with groups that were involved with creating all this, so he knows a lot about it. And then we have T.A. Sayers talking to us about the very, very important work that he has done in all this space. T.A. was involved at the Motuiti Island situation there, and with the group that won this environment court case that then contemplated that the local councils, the regional councils, are now empowered to work in the space of marine protection. And that's just very, very new. And so our regional council also is now in a space where they wish to understand what that all means. And so Tia will talk to us about that. Then Evan will lead us to a bit of a brainstorm session around those tables, which will involve you guys putting forward visions that you may have. And he'll talk about that in detail then. And then we have a little bit of a break, get a drink, we get some nibbles coming out from the kitchen then. And then we bring it all together again from a perspective of collecting all those views together and see where from here perhaps. But we're starting out up there with who we are. And so there are quite a number of people here, but there are some people probably here who want maybe very briefly, like a minute or so, just put their hand up saying, I am so-and-so. People who have some sort of a stake in all this or some capacity in this. And just briefly say who they are, so then when you meet those people, you go like, oh, this is so-and-so, right? And maybe not everybody needs to pop up and say that, but a few people are in the room who are role players in this field. So my name is Thomas Ebert. I'm a teacher here at the school. I'm writing a PhD at the moment at University of Waikato in climate change education. And together with friends, we started this. I have no particular idea of how well this will go to. I'll just be happy to make this space happen for you guys, in which this can galvanize whatever it may be. Does anybody else briefly want to say who they are, because they have a bit of a role to play? Yeah, that's absolutely good.
Hello, my name's Simon. We are making a documentary series called Seasick. We got funding on Thursday and we interviewed David Parker yesterday. So I've driven down through the hideous storm to see all you. So I'm going to be shooting a bit of stuff over there, so if there's anyone that doesn't want to be seen, let me know. Yeah, Police Watch 7, I think. So I'm just getting some general stuff so that when we talk about local interest and people doing this, we've got stuff to cut to. So hopefully I'll speak to some key players afterwards, because we're going to start doing interviews with people, and it would be great to have you all on board. So thank you. Or look for me over here and come and have a chat. Cheers.
Thanks, Kieran. Mike, you want to briefly say who we are? Anybody wants to briefly introduce themselves, come over here? Then, yep.
Hi, my name is Mike Barner. I'm a documentary filmmaker, like Sai over here. We made the documentary The Price of Fish, which looked at the state of our commercial fishery in New Zealand, and where we're going to go to in the future. We're currently working on another couple of environmental films, a follow-up from that, looking at ways we can get ourselves out of the mess we're in currently. So I'm really keen to hear all the views and ideas that people have, and try and be a part of forging a pathway forward.
Cool. Yep.
Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I wasn't at the last meeting. I was away, fortunately. Primarily, I'm the president of the local Whitianga Coromandel Peninsula Fishermen's Association. I've also been a fisherman for 45 years, as was my son and as was my father. There's a lot of fishermen in this town, in this community, and there's a lot riding on what's going to happen here today and possibly down the future. In the future, I should say. So I just wanted to say something quickly. We've all got a lot of friends here, us people who live in Whitianga, the likes of Alison Henry I'm friendly with. I was on the sea change with her. Anna Horn and her late husband. We love those people, but for what they did at Muirara, awesome people. I've got a lot of time for Anna. We've got Sharon Morecambe, who's also a good mate of ours, and of course we're on different sides of the fence. So I'd hate it if our friendships come to suffer here, and they're likely to suffer because myself and a lot of us have got a lot at stake here.
Kira, thank you very much for speaking. The purpose of these communities like in Waiheke is to come together and get together and work out what the issues are, how can we together move forward, and it's totally important that we include everybody with a stake in this, including the fishers. Absolutely. Because if we don't have a healthy ocean, the fishers will not have a future either. It's a common goal to have an abundant, healthy ocean, and we need to work out as a community, how do we get there best? Anybody else to briefly say who they are? Yep.
Kia ora everyone. So my name's Dean Allen. I think Councillor Dennis Tegg briefly introduced me at the last meeting. So I work for Waikato Regional Council. I'm based in the Whitianga office. We've got Dr. Michael Townsend and another one of our staff members who's connected to the Hauraki Golf Forum, Sultana Shah, here today. And the purpose of us being here is just to listen. So thanks for having us.
Kia ora, thank you. Kate.
Kia ora, good afternoon. I'm Kate James. I've got a PhD in marine science, and I'm from a ocean protections kind of conservation background, so I'm keen to see what's going to happen here today as well.
Cheers, thank you.
Hello, Kenatoto Katoa. I'm Marguerite Müllers. I am representing Whitianga Counseling and Psychotherapy Services, and I am the fish. I am representing the fish world, because the fish as such has got no voice. Now, Coromandel is good for your soul. It was advertised with a jet scat, and so that initiated my thought that I will further look into the ethics and the culture of how we deal with fish. So when we have policy workshops with tackling the crisis in our ocean, we mean fish. So let's see what you come up with today. Thank you.
Cheers, thank you. Anybody else wants to introduce themselves briefly, just to who they are? Where? What? What are mates? Oh.
I'm John Davis. I'm the president and life member of the Mercury Bay Game Club and a life member of the Mercury Bay Spearfishing Club.
Kieran, fantastic. Good to have you here. Yep. Yep.
Are they coming from an objective perspective, or like the bird species
I don't know. Do you want to talk to that briefly?
I had land on Rakino, and in my daughter's lifetime, she's 24, and that we bought her when she was 5, and then we sold it 3 years, and in 15 years in our bay we had Tara, octopus, crayfish, scallops, big snapper, kingfish. When we sold 3 years ago, there were none of those. And about a year ago, another Rakino guy, Rob Inglis, others from the commission, a report on the oceans around the places in Rakino. We were just going to make a 3-minute video about that report. We just spent 6 months working on this. We had about 40 interviews. We've been building up and stuff like this. So we are completely on the side of let's save the African population. That's what we are.
Kira, thank you. Very good. Yeah, Mike Barner was the one who showed us the pink Mau Mau disaster that we witnessed there.
Just to put it on perspective, I am a fisher. I eat fish. I love eating fish. I want my kids to eat fish. And I want my friends who fish commercially and recreationally to catch fish in the future. So for me, it's all about just restoring the environment, making sure that everybody gets that opportunity, that people who have jobs, the fishermen, and people who recreationally go over fish have an opportunity in the future. So it's about trying to get that balance right again. We've lost the balance, and we need to get control of that. And as communities, we need to get control of our own communities. We should be local fishermen, only fishermen, not commercial fishermen coming fishing over the top of the commercial fishermen. There should be new rules, there should be different ways of doing it. But if we're going to save the rugby here, we need to look at a different way of managing it.
Yeah, Kira, fantastic. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Nick Wilson. I can speak for the landowners who own coastal land basically from Wharikahu all the way up to Matapawa. The Waitaha, the Fofo, we're all of one mind about this. We've been joining together talking about what's happening on our coast and how it's got less and less seafood over the years. The mussels, the paua, the crayfish, all the fishing is just getting worse and worse. And everyone's anecdotally says the same all around the bay, going, "What's happening? Why is this becoming worse and worse?" So we've been trying to fight against the proposed bat farm, but we're also talking about the scallops, everything. It's just like it seems to me there's too much fishing. It's not. I mean, it needs to be managed more correctly, obviously. So, thank you.
Yes. Anybody else? Very briefly, say who they are for connecting with us. Otherwise, we carry on with our first presentation that Barry Weber will give us. Barry can probably better introduce himself than I can because we haven't met very much yet before. So I hand it over to Barry, and this is about the understanding a bit more about the Revitalising the Gulf papers from the government that just were released. And I think, me including, I'm not yet quite sure that I understand fully what it all means. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. I'm not going to. That's fine. That will do. I haven't got any slides or PowerPoint. Sorry. Right. Okay. Thomas asked me to give us an introduction to the document, and I'll give a background. I live most of the time in Whenua-Kiti on a farm on the coast there, and I've had about 30 years' experience as an environmental advocate in fisheries issues, mainly in Wellington, dealing with a whole range of management of both deep water and inshore. And I'm currently, another hat I wear, I'm one of the two environment reps on the National Rock Lobster Management Group. So I had a prior existence on that group in the 90s. So this is not my document, so I say that, I'm just giving an introduction to it. I was involved in 2 working groups that were involved in the sea change document, the one on fisheries and the one on aquaculture. So that's my interest in this process and its background. So the interesting thing about that was that this document that the government's released is slightly different to what the document that the sea change report produced. So that's the front page of the document. And I suppose the key thing for a lot of it is the different elements of it. And partly there's the question about protected areas. So the slide that, thanks. The slide that Thomas has got here has got the current protected areas that are in the Hauraki Gulf and the proposed protected areas, the shape of which is unclear because they're not necessarily marine reserves. Some of them are benthic areas and some are what they're calling high protection areas. The actual status of them have yet to be decided, so there's a bit more consultation to happen around them. The other thing that's really important to recognise in this process is that what the government's released so far is basically a draft part of elements. So there's a draft fisheries plan that's in the back of the document. It's Appendix 1 of the document. Has different elements, has objectives, and that's supposed to be a plan that the government's going to put forward as Section 11A of the Fisheries Act. So I don't know who made submissions on the inshore fisheries plan that was put out 18 months ago. Anyone here? A few people? So that plan, which the government the bureaucracy has yet to release the final decisions on. So it'll be interesting to see how this fisheries plan that relates to the Hauraki Gulf and the marine park area. So we're talking about a plan that relates only to the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park, as opposed to the inshore plan, which doesn't include any of the shellfish species. So it's just finfish and the shark species in the inshore. So there's different elements, and how these all fit together is really unclear at the moment in terms of the way that the government's doing in the process. The clear objective of this is ecosystem-based fisheries management. So the proposal is to have a fisheries plan that has a bunch of protected areas in them, as well as a range of other arrangements within the plan. So that there's sort of 3 objectives they're proposing for the fisheries plan. That is healthy and functioning aquatic ecosystem, fisheries resources at a level that meet the treaty partners and stakeholders' needs, inclusive and integrated regional governance of fisheries. So the government's put forward some draft objectives, and then there's some management objectives which fit within those objectives. To protect the marine benthic habitat, that's a part of the objective. Protect ecologically important marine habitat. Mitigate the impact of fishing. Reduce the bycatch and fisheries-related deaths. Stock in or about target levels. So there's a question about what target levels, as the slide that Thomas had earlier, which is the question about we've got low populations of lobster and low populations of snapper in terms of the last assessments, and the concern about the state of the Gulf generally in terms of the stocks that live there. So ensuring appropriate management, decreasing mortality of undersized fish, and provide for a robust recreational and customary harvest. Ensure local tikanga and mataranga and local knowledge is used. Utilise customary tools. Increase capacity and provide greater expertise. Engage with councils. Partner with others and facilitate co-management. So there's a whole range of rather conflicting objectives that the government is putting forward in their draft policy. Then there's a question about trawl tracks. So there's an idea that in the original sea change document, there was a suggestion of moving trawling out of the Hauraki Gulf. The government's instead come back with a decision of allowing a set of trawl tracks. They're unknown what they are or where they will be. The other part of the announcement, which is yet to be put forward as aquaculture areas. The document itself, if you get a copy of the document, it's on the MPI and also Department of Conservation websites. It says that they'll produce some aquaculture management areas. If you look at the sea change document, there was a whole range of aquaculture areas around. There was one north of Castle Island in this area, for example, was proposed in the sea change document. It's unclear whether that's what's being proposed in the future. Relationship to the coastal plan is another, the Regional Council's coastal plan is another factor that's pretty unclear as well, and how that all fits together. If you also look at the fisheries, the draft fisheries plan in this document, which has this page, it's Appendix 2 of the report, it has a whole range of different elements to it, and it has a whole range of commitments for research and what have you, but none of that is really unclear how it all fits together. To manage this and to put together the final plan, the government's proposing to establish a multi-stakeholder working group, which will, over basically a year, 18-month process, put together the final plan for consultation under Section 11 of the Fisheries Act. And they're also proposing that there's some agreement about plan indicators, so what sort of success should be in regard to fisheries in the Hauraki Gulf. So all those elements, despite the fact we think it's pretty clear, there's a lot of lack of, not so much transparency, but there's a lot of things that have yet to be decided in terms of the process and where it all ends up. So I think I'll leave it there, because people may have questions and comments, and we can come back to them later on. Thanks. Thanks, Thomas.
Great, thank you very much. So now we got TA talk to us on the work he did in Motuiti and the whole processes he went through. TA.
Kia ora tātou. Ko te Atarangi Aho, and thanks Thomas for inviting me to come and share this story. Basically, we've all experienced change in our lifetimes. What's happened is that we've seen our taonga fish, the things that we connect ourselves to, slowly disappear. We've seen the reef system slowly change as a diver, as a spear fisherman, as people of the ocean. We have slowly seen that shift in the character that once was in this marine space. And just recently with what we've seen with mau and various other species that are now exposed to these sort of impacts, they have devastating effects. We've actually seen, these big kelp forests here at Otaiti slowly disappear. So my kōrero today is really, it's not a prescription, it's, there we go. It's, okay, right here. It's really just a touch on what the Motuiti experience has taught us, and to also touch on how localised controls can be manifested through working with your regional councils, working with the various authorities that have a duty of care to the values that communities have. So we're going to look over the background to marine protection, and hopefully build a shared understanding about pathways that can achieve strategies to protecting your blue backyard, which is uniquely yours because your identity has been evolved through that relationship. And then also some of the other provisions with the Resource Management Act. And then possibly we'll do some questions maybe before going into workshop. So Motuiti is is a dynamic habitat. Many of you have probably fished around it over your years, or have been out there sailing, or enjoyed it through various other activities. It has a diversity and a range of habitats that protect and preserve the taonga, the mauri, the life force, and the energy that we've all shared as a community. And as a community, we've all had different interactions. We've had interactions through customary relationships. We've had interactions through our recreational well-being. We've had interactions through our commercial and economic benefit as a coastal community. But there is also a vast majority of people that haven't seen that haven't put their heads under the water, that don't know the significance of those threads of life force that we've obviously been so privileged here in New Zealand to have. And we're all built up around this as a coastal community. This is uniquely part of your identity, and this is uniquely part of our identity at Mōtiti and through the Bay of Plenty. But it's facing several challenges. It's facing challenges from marine plastics to the discharges that are going into our marine spaces without treatment, through the threats of climate change and various other impacts that we're facing, through different manipulations, through new technologies, through seabed mining. The potential for seabed mining off the Waihi coastline, it's still viable. It's still potentially there, and that could destroy the kāinga or the nursery for some of those really intrinsically important species that go there to spawn and to occupy that space. Ultimately, all these effects are destabilising the ecosystem that they rely upon. And each thread, each Jenga block that we slowly remove or that is destroyed by our inaction to preserve these species will slowly topple our marine and coastal area. And we see that driving from the large order sharks, various other species, bullfish, whales, all the way down to what we start to see, the proliferation of jellyfish and various other barren conditions that we've been experiencing as the shift has happened. And it's told in our stories. It's told in our relationships that have changed through our lifetimes. From the 1950s, where we had this relationship with hapuku, and then today where we see a very different sort of hapuku that is seldom encountered. We shift around to different species, and that's noticeable in what we share with our community, because it's a shared community experience. And fundamentally, it's because of what we've seen as the industrialisation of our marine space. So this was obviously from a study done in the reconstruction of fishing in New Zealand, and as you can see, it has been significant, not necessarily pretty much without our appreciation of just how fast and how rapidly it ramped up. Now, I just want to note that here in the 1960s was when our kaumātua and kuia at Mōtiti Island sought protections and preservations for the rohe, and basically what happened after that is all of this happened after that, which is inside some of those living memories here, where they watched pair trawlers move up and down the bay, where they watched various other large mechanical foreign charter boats just come through and clean out whole fishing grounds. And unfortunately, it wasn't until we got to the mid-80s that we actually started to address that problem. And we started to put in place the protections through creating restrictions and guides that would hopefully be able to recover it. And
what was the artisanal scope? What does that mean,
artisanal or artisanal? Basically, they're small local fishing operators, and it's pretty much in response to the degradation of those fishing grounds. And so what ends up happening is small operators can still try and maintain their local fishery will kind of move into that space. We can probably start to, if you look at some of those actual spikes, they're actually related to technology. So to diesel coming into the environment, and then obviously to the bigger vessels coming in. So when we start this out, we start out with like sailing and rowboats and really low tech sort of stuff, and then we just start to see the pressure come on over this journey that we've been on in our marine space, and that saw the loss of our hapuku. These taonga species have pretty much been very stripped out. Our kaumātua and our elders and old people had stories and relationships with these within near shore limits. Possibly even some of you have a relationship with catching them closer to the bay without having to go to those offshore seamounts. So it's been documented. The extinction of these species has been documented. And when I mean it's a localised extinction factor, and it's an ecological extinction factor that we're facing. And we can see it in the catch returns over the years, and you can see it in the relationship that you might have had when you were younger compared to what you're experiencing today. And a lot of that is because of these inappropriate activities, bottom trawling, just been scraping over and over again throughout the Bay of Plenty. And to just put it into context, this is little Motiti in the middle of it all. So how do we try to address the issue? And there's a myriad of statutes that sit in amongst this, and there's some classic targets that govern the marine space. You have the Fisheries Act, you have the Marine Reserves Act, the Wildlife Act, the Marine Mammals Protection Areas Act, the Conservation Act, the Resource Management Act. The Petroleum and Minerals Act actually has some protections for cable zones and various other pipe and infrastructure, and then whatever the Takutai Moana or the Foreshore and Seabed Act might provide, which is probably just going to be some sort of guidance. And then there's this thing called the Marine Protection Areas Act, or bill, or whatever it is. It's a hope and a dream that maybe we might be able to see something that helps to formulate some guidance around marine protection. So for us, the journey started with going and seeking knowledge, and we went down and sat with the kaumātua at Ngāti Konohi in Whangarā, which is on the east coast, just north of Gisborne. And they had created what they called a taonga suite, which is where they put a high protection area or a no-take protection area next to a mātaitai or a community fishing area within their rohe. The issue really is that having this kind of relationship it provides a pathway to be able to at least ensure that those stocks are available, or those resources are there, and also to ensure that there's localised management involved in it. The limiting factor is obviously the Fisheries Act, and I'll discuss that in a little bit. So what we have is we also have Tuhua as another example, and Tuhua has a marine reserve off the northern end, which probably most of you are quite familiar with. And then it so-called has this restricted commercial fishing area, which really doesn't restrict very much, as probably most of you have experienced. But nonetheless, it still provided some insights into the effectiveness of this sort of nesting or cooperative marine management. So what happened in terms of where were the catalysts? Where do we actually derive the information from in terms of how do we know what's happening in our marine space? Well, unfortunately, we suffered one of the largest ecological marine disasters in New Zealand's history, and that was the grounding of the MV Rena. And when the Rena grounded, basically the information that was generated through the salvage recovery process fed into an understanding of just how bad our marine space had gotten. and how much of a necessity it was that we started to do something different about it. And so we went and asked the Minister of Primary Industries at the time, I think it was Nathan Guy, to work with the community to develop a Section 186 to preserve and protect the life force that was created through the exclusion zone of the recovery process. And what ended up happening is we ended up learning that there is significant limitations to the application of the Section 186 process. So the area that was asked for was just around Otaiti, where the arena and basically mirrored the previous exclusion zone. The Minister declined to provide for that because it's at the Minister's discretion. And that's a really important point in terms of the Fisheries Act. The Fisheries Act is at the Minister's discretion. And in order to be able to utilise those tools, you have to get the Minister to basically shift his mind, and there isn't any recourse in order to be able to, in essence, create or protect the values and the associations that are within these environments that are depleting in our coastal marine area. So once we kind of realised that the Minister had these awesome powers but wouldn't use them, then we started to address, well, how do you get the recognition for marine protection and the significance of values? So in 2015, the Kaumātua and Kuia with the Mōtiti Ohimona Trust set about taking a declaration in the Environment Court that set that the regional authority with respect to the values protected under the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, their regional policy statement, and the RMA had, or the Resource Management Act, had grounds to be able to protect from activities that destroyed or diminished or degraded intrinsic values, landscape values, cultural values that were beyond the Fisheries Act, and biodiversity and habitat values, all obviously intrinsically connected to this resource. Because what we found through going through this process is that the Fisheries Act has a very clear function, and that is the sustainability of fish stocks for fisheries resources. And by all means, that's probably a slight more interpretation. I'm sure someone else in this room probably knows the exact wording, but in essence, the Fisheries Act only considers that this straight line is maintained. And unfortunately, what we know is that that straight line does this. It just basically, although we are catching the same fish year on year, what we're actually also doing is the ones that are out there in the ocean are disappearing. They're being removed from the system. And because they're being removed from the system, it's having devastating effects on the ecosystem. So in 2014, 15, we also took the regional policy statement and we created, through the regional policy statement, the Mōtiti Natural Environment Area. And we then started to document the things that were significant to us as people from Mōtiti Island, but also the significance that they had in terms of their relationship with Indigenous biodiversity areas, high and outstanding natural character, and cultural values that were associated with our coastal marine area. And what ended up eventuating is that that inventory was then able to be utilised in order to make better informed decisions. And then when we went to the Attorney General, then went on to appeal the declaration for the controls, we were able to further win on the principles of intrinsic values, wahi tapu, navigation, and natural landscapes, and of course Indigenous biodiversity again. But it was about the purpose of the controls. So the important thing is about the purpose and as to what you're looking to achieve. If you're seeking to achieve a fisheries management purpose, you will have to work with the Fisheries Act and ask the Minister for his grace to protect your local backyard. And as we know, the Minister doesn't look at your local backyard. He looks at the fisheries management area, that pretty much your local backyard is a pinprick on the whole scale. And this is why it's an important role that regional councils play in helping to inform those significant values so that communities can have controls that are appropriate for them as opposed to the controls that are appropriate for central government. So we then went about and did the merits case, and here in pink are outlined our wāhi tapu areas that are within our coastal marine area, and in yellow is the what we call our wāhi taonga area, where we wanted the removal of bulk harvesting. And to get rid of the bulk harvesting was actually a higher priority, well, we thought, than anything else, because we thought it would be an easier, I suppose, a lower hanging fruit. Turns out it wasn't actually, but we'll probably dive into that a little bit later. And then that sits within what we call the Mōtiti Arc, which is our Arohe Moana. And so through this process, we all kind of went into an Environment Court hearing. And the important thing about having a judicial process is that it provides the opportunity for communities to have their engagement in the issues that are important to them as an interest. And what ended up, we had multiple parties from the Attorney General all the way down to Hapuaniwi, all basically expressing the significance of those values. And we sat in front of the largest court of the Environment Court at that time, which had 2 judges and 3 commissioners. But what we have come to the realisation is if we're discussing fish inside a fishing net, that is a fishing activity. But if we're discussing the kainga, or the home of the fish, the toka that the fish is related to, the beach, the values that are associated with these places and spaces that are special to us, then we can look at using and implementing it through the Resource Management Act to preserve the characters and qualities that are within those areas that are specific to our relationship as a community. And so the judge, after, I think it was like 3 weeks or something like that, we ended up coming to this realization that these areas here, these three areas, which is comprised of 8 toka tapu, 8 toka tupuna, are so outstanding and so important because everywhere else in the Bay of Plenty on the evidence was so destroyed. We have proliferated kinnibarrens all around our coastlines. Round Mōtiti, it is completely a kinnibarren. And what is so significant about these is they're outstanding. And they're the last places of outstanding quality. And so the judge confirmed that there will be a prohibition on the destruction of flora and fauna in these places. Not necessarily a restriction on fishing itself as a fisheries purpose, but on the fact that if we don't do something, we won't have anything. And this is a reality that we're facing all around our coasts. And so within that, we've now established what is hopefully the journey towards having further provisions in order to preserve the Mōtiti natural environment area, to exclude the bulk harvesting activities, particularly the use of pots, nets and dredges, and that's going to go through a further process. And the reason why it's not about the fishing itself, it's about how we're fishing. And I think we just heard it a little bit before, that it's just the broad spectrum bulk harvesting that has actually stripped the life force out of our reefs. And so this is the final decision map, and this provides a bit of a context around what is how, I suppose, MPI and other authorities look at it. They look at the world through these really straight, rudimentary lines, as opposed to understanding that there's actually more to the marine space than just a straight line. It's actually wavy. It actually has many different dimensions to it. And right now, as we're having this conversation, in Northland, Te Uri o Heki Heki and Rāwhiti Marae and Ngāti Kuta are currently going through their own journey, their own manifestation of what is important to them and how they can manage it. So around Mimi Whangata in the south here, they're seeking to their Rahui Tapu to be honoured. And around Monganui Bay, they're seeking to have their Rahui Tapu to be honoured as well. And the reason why they're doing that is because every 2 years they have to go through the entire rigmarole to ask the minister to give them grace so that they can preserve the significance of those places. Every 2 years they have to have butterflies and anxiety in order to preserve the life force that lives there and that they derive their connection and identity from. And then within this what they call Area C, they're seeking the removal of bulk harvesting nets, perseining, bottom trawling, and any other contact bottom gear, basically. So that's just an update as to how different communities are going through this journey. And in terms of, I suppose, the pathways that we went through, I'll just touch on these because I think this conversation is kind of about what do you guys want to do with your own space, and just to kind of develop on that as to, we started developing a strategy. We took a strategic approach. We then became very knowledgeable about our subject matter, using all of those other experiences, using all the knowledge that is out there and in our community. I mean, there's plenty of knowledge around here from all the years of experience that you have. Becoming issue-driven instead of personality-driven, and ensuring that we stay focused on the problem and not get caught up in the internals of our own social dilemma. And being propositionary, making the proposition instead of oppositionary is critical to the future. We need to be able to propose as community how our relationship with this space is going to look like, and what is the relationship that our children are going to have and our grandchildren after that. Understanding that we're all limited, we all don't have all the money in the world, or we don't have all the knowledge in the world. And then understanding that we have to work with all the other people in this space because we're an island. We've always had to work together. And then looking at the governance and the regulatory frameworks that I touched on earlier in this talk. And then networking as allies, as friends, as community, in order to seek the betterment of our marine space together. And then obviously doing cost and risk analysis, because things all cost something. It's not free. There are no free rides in the world. You know, everyone's got to put in the hard yards. They've all got to do their own journey, and they've got to walk their own walk. It's really important that it's your own journey. No one else can give it to you. You only have to stand up and actually ask for it. And then finally, do something. Implement it. Get on with it. We're facing a crisis in our marine space. We've lived it, we've experienced it. It's time that we actually, as a community, at local levels, started to voice the concerns and the experiences we've had, similar to what's happened with the declaration of the Rahui for the scallops and various other species. You as a community have gone through that journey to stand by it and then review, learn from the experience, and then do it all over again until you get it right. Because what we do know is that within protection, there comes abundance. That if we protect the marine space for the qualities that we want to see in the future, then we will bring back the restoration of that life force, of that interconnectedness. Because fundamentally what we're facing is the extraction of everything that we've all grown accustomed to, everything that we've grown up with. It's slowly disappearing, and it's disappearing very rapidly and very quickly. We are down to less than 10% of, these intrinsically important stocks of snapper, crayfish. We're plummeting We are teetering on those localised extinction events. We know that we're facing these ecological extinction phenomenons where we see the proliferation of kinnibarrons. This is happening on our watch. Because if one thing tugs on a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. And that is the most important thing, is that we here are all interconnected because we're all here. Ngā mihi kia koutou, mauri ora tātou.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. This is quite a moving and amazing presentation. Thank you very much again. Quick minutes. I'll put up a slide now for leading us into. Then Evan will lead us into. So what's happening next is that we get together on our tables to brainstorm together on a few things. And Evan will do this. I'll just bring up the slide that goes with that. Give me a sec.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, TA. Thank you, Barry, for providing the context for us there and a bit of groundwork. Look, we've probably only got about an hour until the club's going to get pretty full, so I want to lead you guys through a bit of a brainstorming session. What we're going to do now is we're going to give you guys the opportunity as the community to talk about your vision for the Hauraki Gulf. What are the issues that you see, and what are some of the actions that you think that we can take as a community to address that? Can I just ask first, we've got quite a few people up front here. We've also got some folks in the back. Just from a show of hands, who is keen to be involved in this workshopping session? I assume everybody up front. Folks in the back, anybody keen? You guys, no? Yes? Okay. All right. We'll focus on the folks in the front here. Okay, the first thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is stretch your legs. If we could please get no more than 6 or 7 people at each table, and if I could please encourage you each to get into a table with somebody that you don't already know. Please do that now. Okay, how's everybody situated there? We're all nicely spread out, all ready to go, all nicely acquainted, hopefully. Okay. All right, so we're just going to kick into it now, into the first session. As I said, we're going to go through 3 sort of sessions here. We're going to work through successively, and hopefully come to some sort of defined actions out of today. So the first step I'm going to encourage you all to think about, and it's just important to know for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to start very broad and very visionary, but we need to have some defined boundaries for that vision, and that is going to be the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park and its catchments. I'm going to apologize for some of you for whom some of this process might seem somewhat familiar, but I think it's really important for today that we capture as much community feedback in this space as we can. So the first question that I'm going to ask you all to talk amongst yourself at your tables is to talk about what is your vision for the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. I want you to think as broadly as you can, so don't think about what any of the hindrances to that vision might be. Just if you had any vision and there were no restrictions whatsoever, what do you want to see in the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park? I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes to discuss that amongst your groups. You've got a piece of paper there. Please capture as many of those ideas as you can. And eventually we're going to come back and we're going to sort of report to each other on what we've come up with at our individual tables. And go.
Every table has a sheet like this, and there's a column like there on the screen. What's the vision? So the first column, first 10 minutes.
Yep, first column on your big sheet of paper there. What is your vision? Good on you. We're just getting close to about the halfway point, folks, just so you know. Just encourage you as you're thinking about your vision. This can either be a vision statement, but just think about some of the key themes of that vision, what some of the indicators might be that your vision has actually been achieved. Try to define that, crystallize that as well as you can. All right, folks, just a couple more minutes. Get those visions down on paper. Okay, folks, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys very much. What we're going to do now, if you could please just choose one person from your table, and we're just going to spend a minute at each table. If you guys could please just run us through what you've discussed at your table. Tell us about your vision. All right, should we start? You guys happy with us to start with this table here?
Right. Hello. Right, hello everybody. Our table has a very, very large vision, and it is largely centred upon It's largely centred upon abundance, increasing abundance, and getting back a balance in the Hauraki Gulf. We also want it to be clean, that's clean of sediment, runoff, the aquaculture and quarrying, and definitely more marine protection. Whichever tool they use, we're not sure, but our vision would imagine 30% protection in Hauraki Gulf area, 15% of that is total protection, the other 15 of that 30 only recreational fishing allowed. We'd want to ban dredging and bottom trawling, and we definitely review the recreation limit of catch and change the size parameters. Also, the importance is that we want the balance of economic and in the environment welfare considered. And also very important, some rules involved in boating around the Gulf. We'd like those looked to change to protect the biophysical aspects of the Gulf, because part of our group have witnessed damage to the shoreline due to irrational boating and unresponsible behaviour. So we have a very large vision, and we haven't prioritised it yet. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you guys very much. That was very good, I thought. This table, have you guys got somebody happy to just present your vision that you've come up with here?
Yep. Kia ora. So we've got a pretty broad range of people on this table, so we had a very broad vision. But just like everyone else, returned abundance and biodiversity was number one, really, that everyone agreed on. And case in point being scallops. It would be so nice to actually, just go and get an easy feed of nice tasty scallops. At a governance level, better governance, better government funding for fisheries research and marine research, and more monitoring so we know what goes on out there. We talked about better collaboration between everyone. Like there's lots of stakeholders here. There's forest and bird, there's commercial, there's tourism and charter operators, there's recreational fishermen. We actually all need to work better together and not take our eyes off the game, which is a lot of the destruction is happening by people who have got no interest locally. So there's no point locking away 30% of our coastline, which I think is just a mad number to be putting out there, when we should be looking at every fish that's caught out here, how does it benefit the locals? That's something I'm pretty passionate about. Better economic return locally for every fish taken from the ocean, not sold for $3.50 in Russia. So that would be one of the main indicators, really. But at the end of the day, locals managing their fishery, their coastline, and better collaboration between everyone.
Very cool. Thank you, guys. That was great. Okay, has got somebody from this table who's happy to present your vision just quickly? Thank you.
Kia ora. We decided not to talk about limits and bans because Thomas told us that's on the next column. So we've just got a fairly generalised thing about vision, and as with the last two tables, number one, building back abundance, bring back original biodiversity, and have a self-sustaining ecosystem that was. The second most about the interconnectedness of us all, like that last quote on the last speakers. The environment is one, and we are all just a little part of it. So we need unity of vision. We need to stop being partisan or self-absorbed and get into what will preserve the environment, the entire environment. Somebody, Marguerite, mentioned the land and, Dave mentioned the land and the sea, not just look at it from the point of view of the marine, because what we do on the land is affecting the ocean, which is what the sea change document did very well, I think. And I asked a question earlier to our first speaker, because we didn't get a chance to ask questions, but yeah, that sea change document has been changed and adapted. Yeah. So anyway, the third most important point is to preempt extinction of our species, of our environment, especially hapuka, but all. And to change our culture, to have a cultural revolution here where we are thinking how we think, what we promote, as the Coromandel is all about. Okay, thanks.
That was great. Thank you, guys. I think I can already see some common themes emerging, which is really good. But abundance and biodiversity to note. All right, we've got somebody from this table who's happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, there must have been some pretty fast writers in those other groups. We've got 4 points. No further degradation of the marine habitat, improved water quality, working towards the restoration of the Gulf to its former glory, and a sustainable take from the acknowledged users of the fishery. So that was the four points of vision we come up with.
Short and sweet, the way I like it as a facilitator. Okay, next group, please.
All right, so we had a range of views. We've just captured a bunch of bullet points that could form a vision. So it includes healthy Gulf, reduced sedimentation and pollution, reduced plastics. We want to understand the differences between the Firth of Thames and the eastern part of the Hauraki Gulf. Local decision making over sort of decision making made by others. We want ecosystems to flourish. We want people to be awake, people to really want to be involved to the topic. A couple of points made at the end were having some alternatives for food. Does that involve technology or job creation? Having fair access to the Gulf for all of the resource users. And then some questions around balancing or considering or understanding the exporting of our products and the value of that. And is there an opportunity for subsidising or incentivising local sale?
That's great. Thank you, guys. Okay, some very good visionary work there. All right, this next step now, we're going to get into a little bit of detail about the issues. So now I want you guys to think about the issues that currently impact on the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. Now, I've just got a little bit of a favor to ask you. We need to be a little bit focused now as we move into this second session, and I'm going to ask folks to really think about the issues that we can affect locally here in our local community, okay? So there's obviously a lot of things that impact on the wider ocean environment, microplastics, climate change, ocean acidification. We're just going to consider those things, whilst very important, out of scope for the purpose of this exercise, and we just want you guys to now really start to crystallize that thinking about the issues that affect us here locally that we can impact on and improve locally. And you guys have got 10 minutes to do that, and we'll do something similar. As you guys are working through the issues, just think about your vision that we just talked about. Think about why your vision isn't the case presently. What's not working with the status quo?
Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. Test, test.
Okay, folks, we're getting close to the halfway point, just so you know, halfway point. As you guys are talking amongst your tables, it would be good if you can now agree on your 5 biggest issues amongst your table. Refine those issues into 5 big issues that you can all agree with at your table, and we get you guys to report back on those. Just about a minute left there, folks, to wrap up. Okay, that's looking great, folks. Okay, we'll wind up that session. If we can just wind up those discussions, get those issues, those agreed issues on each of the tables, we'll. Yep. Okay. We'll now do a similar exercise as before. We'll start over on this end, and we'll just get you guys to report back very briefly on the 5 top agreed issues that you guys have all arrived at your individual tables. Have we got somebody here who's keen to talk to that? Okay, here we go.
Okay, so this is the last time I speak. I've been stitched up by the team. Okay, top 5 issues from the table down the end. Management, and we're talking overarching all-use management. Second one is resourcing around compliance, and that's all acts, so fisheries, on the land, compliance around your plastics, all of that type of stuff. Third issue is technology and population, increasing the pressure on the catch and the use of the areas. Fourth is the effectiveness and distribution of marine reserves, and we note that there's many sides of that discussion. The fifth is water quality. And this table believed that sediment was number 1 issue. And we added a 6th of the 5 issues, which was education and getting people to participate.
Okay, that's great. That's all very interesting. Thank you. We'll go over to this second table now. You guys happy to present on your issues?
Okay, we put overfishing, which is just one word but pretty broad at the top. It could mean a lot of things in a lot of different fisheries. Water quality, no current protection of breeding stock, loss of diversity, drastic measures should be taken to protect the species most at risk, and fifthly, education to help public understanding.
Okay, some pretty severe impacts there.
Our table has decided something similar. Number 1, increase education and awareness. Number 2, stop bottom dredging. Victorian box dredge destroys the seabed. And proactive governance locally on regional level and central level, more control locally in regards of the finance. So if the Waikato Regional Council doesn't know what's going on here, then we won't get the money. And if the government money arrives in Waikato, we have seen, and when it sort of comes down to Whitianga, they don't even know where the town is in the past. So control of rapidly growing private fishery and fleet. What was that? Fleet. Yeah. And more local control was our main topic. And that's it.
That's good. Okay, so we've got some actual physical sort of issues that we're identifying, as well as some overall sort of management issues.
Okay, our first one is employment, obviously, mainly around tourism. If you get to take your charter fishing people out, your people who like to pay some money and leave it in the community, they need to be able to catch some fish. Number two, communities feel powerless, and I'd agree with that too. There's a lack of across-the-board collaboration, so obviously that's why we're having meetings like you're having today. Even as a commercial fisherman, we have that problem. It's very difficult to get sort of go for it, if you like, even though a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, with the commercial guys. Number three, short rotation, plantation forestry on steep slopes. So on the sea change process, a lot of that area is flat land, and the farmers come in for the stick there with their fertiliser, etc., etc. On the east coast of the Coromandel Peninsula, we've got a lot of radiata pine, and at times when I've been at sea after a heavy rainfall, a heavy rain or a big storm, the plumes coming out of the Whangamata, Tairua, Whitianga, Whangapā estuaries is unbelievable. Now, you people don't get to see it unless you're standing on the wharf, and when you do see it, it's all dispersed, but I'm sure it has a huge effect on a lot of our species, scallops included, and also on your nursery grounds up in the estuaries, which we all know require stable seafloor for little fish to grow. So instead of just wiping radiata pine on steep slopes, there's always a way forward, and you could go into indigenous trees. It might take 100 years for that tree to be mature, and then you pull it out with a helicopter. So it's a win-win. Everyone makes a quid, and we don't get a whole lot of crap coming down the slope when we get half a metre of rain in 24 hours. And believe me, that can happen here. That all comes down to a lack of knowledge and research. It's what we touched on before. Treasury needs to put a lot more money into looking at these things rather than coming to the stakeholders. We don't have the coin, and when they do decide there's a problem, it's too late. Number 5, over-harvesting. Issues around over-harvesting with all sorts of species. I'll put my fisherman hat on here. There's moves afoot to address the hāpuka, which people are going to see very shortly, which is pretty. It's a huge move. Recreational fishing and commercial are collaborating on this, so it's not as though people are ignoring that. Sport Fishing Council, correct. What I will say about crayfishing. I was a cray fisherman for 19 years, so I know a little bit about it out of this port. There's been a 50% quota cut through cray too. That's a huge cut, and recreation have gone from 6 to 3. So let's hope in a few years you're going to see a big increase in crayfish. It's not as though nothing's been done about over harvesting. It's not as though everyone's sitting on their arse. I've sneaked in a number 6 here, plastic in the aquaculture. That's an elephant in the room. Everyone thinks aquaculture is the greatest thing going. There's that much bloody plastic coming out of aquaculture, ropes, etc., that get into the environment. It's not funny, and they need to be bought. They need to look at some different way of addressing that. Thank you.
Well, one important point is that we forgot to mention is there should be a review of catch limits, because there are a lot of species of fish, reef fish in particular, there's no limit on catching them. We know what happened to the pink mau. So this is something I think should seriously be looked at. Blue mau not protected, rock cod are not protected. There's half the fish in the ocean that have no protection at all in them. Sorry, half the fish in the ocean have no protection at all. There's no limit. There needs to be limits. Personally, I think, I don't want to tread on too many people's toes here, but I think there should be a ban on trawling. I think they should phase trawling out and bring in long lining, which is a higher value catch. And the gentleman at the next table, I'm sorry, what is your name? Phil just mentioned half hooker. Well, I went on a trip down to the Bluff just recently, and it was so good to be able to get blue cod in the fish and chip shop and buy half hooker in the supermarket. These are my two favourite fish, and it would be nice to see half hooker in our fish shops again. Yeah, that's about it. That's the point that we missed, the long line fishing, bringing that in instead of trawling.
Cool. We're going to get into actions in the next session, but thank you. Obviously hearing some overlap in terms of over-harvesting, and also really good to hear some of the more holistic impacts coming from this group, particularly around land management, sedimentation primarily from forestry.
Our group would like to endorse many of the points that the other groups have made too, and we found it quite difficult just coming up with 5 issues. Possibly in no great order, but the first one we've got down is our local, regional and central government. It needs to act it needs to act fast and to implement change and protection much faster than it's doing. Yes, we're frustrated with the effort and the time it takes to get anything done, so we would like that to happen. Also, we'd like to see education, the importance of people understanding science-based information that has been gathered and analysed is really important. And along with that, possibly it comes a change of understanding that the oceans aren't just taking the crayfish and the snapper. Actually, oceans are a lot more, and the interdependence of those species. You know, what about the demoiselles and the sponges and the moki? All those are important too. So I think we need to actually understand the ocean is more just an extractive resource. Third one is the enforcement of the rules. There was frustration that there are rules out there and yet they are broken and there's not consequences, so that needs addressing. And on to immediate legislation to reduce the destructive fishing practices, whether it's methods, whether it's quota, whatever, they need to change now. And of course the important one overall is the increase of marine protected areas, and that will help all those other things that we're concerned about, apart from things like sedimentation, etc. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Okay, guys, this is going to be the last session. We're going to round this up. We're going to now galvanize into some actual actions. I want you guys to think about, as individuals, if you had one wish to fix the issues that impact on the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park, what would that one wish be? Think of something that's actually practical, achievable, that we can actually do here in our local communities. And I want you guys to come up with a bit of a wish list at your tables, and we're going to talk about that afterward. Okay, folks, you got a couple more minutes there to get your wishes down. Get those wish lists. Okay, folks, we're going to round it up there. All right, hopefully everybody's got their wish lists in place. You've now got a bit of a platter there for you as well. Okay, guys, what we're going to do now is just very quickly, we're just going to get each table to talk about their wish list. We are getting close to time, so I will ask everybody to please keep it as concise as possible.
Right, we have a few number one issues. One of the first one that came up was a method of reducing and eliminating bycatch. Next one was bottom trawling and dredging should be banned now. People are seeing them coming right in close. This should not be happening on the seafloor. The other one should be increasing the area of marine protected areas. The Hahei area has proposed to be extended seawards. I would also prefer it to move around the coast because crayfish travel at night. Crayfish wander around. They have been known to go up to 10, 12 kilometres out of their holes. They are getting caught. And the number of crayfish are reducing in the Hahei Reserve, and the kinnibarrons are encroaching inside the Hahei Reserve. Also, the runoff of nutrients from the harbour, the sedimentation nutrient loading has to be reduced. Ross also has an idea of another marine reserve should be proposed.
Yeah, I live at Wharekaho, and I would propose another marine reserve on the other side of the bay, running from Round Island across to Double Bay, which would still allow fishing just off Whauwhau, and then up to Sandy Bay, and then back across to Round Island. This would also get rid of the mussel spat farm, which has been proposed too, which is... Thanks, Phil.
Was that it? Was that all it? Yep. Cool. Thank you, guys. That was great. All right, we've got this table's wish list. Hopefully it's not another platter.
Sick of me, or you're going to have to do it? You've got a good voice.
You got it. Yep.
Jeez, I wish I had read this. Local hapu-based management... Sorry? Needed. I'll read that again. Local hapu-based management needed. Replace all plastics in aquaculture, farming in the Hauraki Gulf with hemp and other materials. Replace all plastics in aquaculture, farming in the Hauraki Gulf with hemp or other products. People be aware of the results of their actions and take responsibility. That goes for a lot of things, doesn't it? Collectively campaign Waikato District Council. Regional Council, you mean, rightio. Sorry about this. Collectively campaign Regional Council or the Waikato Regional Council to ban bottom contact. All right? So that's up for argument in the incoming sea change, as we heard, with trawl corridors, etc., etc. Under fisheries management, we need to think about how we're going to count the recreational fish, namely snapper. At the moment, it's just a guess. Much better marine research and monitoring across ecosystems. More marine reserves, exclamation marks, ×2. Reducing or banning trawlers and purse seiners. Okay, that's 1. Reducing or banning trawlers and purse seiners. And foreign operated owners. Well, I can tell you something in New Zealand's law with fishing. No foreigner can own New Zealand fishing quota. It's has to stay in a New Zealander's hands, whether you're a huge company or a small individual like myself. Cannot be sold. No marine reserves. Did you do this last one?
So I'll read to it. I hear everyone banning around 30% marine protected areas. I think it's bollocks. I think the major issue is bulk harvesting. Actually, bulk harvesting, not by anyone in this room, including any of the cray fishermen. Yep, that's all the trawlers that come through here. Like every night, I live up on a hill and I see them. I'm out at sea every day. How many people here can actually say, like these guys, like this guy, that they're at sea communing with the sea every day? Not many people in this room actually know what is going on out there. Yeah, no bulk harvesting. It's quite ironic, I'm just going to say. It's actually bloody tasty food, but wouldn't it be nice to be eating some smoked fish or good fat, good protein? Like, the major issue in New Zealand, globally even at the moment, there's a health pandemic in the world that is caused by eating shit food like this. It's probably meat processed, made in China. That is the issue. Where is our food coming from? These guys catch it. I take people out catching it. These guys go out every day and catch it. Good, healthy food. Let's not send it overseas. Sorry, guys. Let's not send it to China. Let's work out ways that everyone in this room, we should all be eating fucking crayfish right now.
Fair enough. I'd be happy with that. Okay, thank you guys very much. Again, please, we are getting short on time. You guys could please keep it as concise as possible.
Okay, so we had a number of issues. First, carry on the conversation. Education and action. Stop bottom dredging immediately. Also ensure through actions that we have a legacy to pass on to our children. End export of hāpuka, blue nose, blue cod, and make them available locally in the market. Review all catch limits. To think holistically and encourage a cultural shift. The protection of spawning areas in the estuaries particularly. And better monitoring and efforts of our marine environment.
That's great. We've got some good defined actions there out of that.
Okay, the individual number one issues at this table were not enough marine reserves, rejuvenating practices, example, floating man-made food chains. It's a bit interesting one. Large snapper and crayfish to not be taken to increase the genetic pool. Better management, biodiversity, sustainable oceans. Stop destructive fishing methods, bottom trawling, seining, dredging and netting. And lastly, insufficient funding for good impartial science which decisions on sustainability can be based on.
That's a big one. I like that last one.
Kia ora. I've got given the job this time to read these individual preferences. I don't think we ever had enough time for any of the preferences or any of the previous questions to work out whether we all agreed on them. But anyway, these, the first preference was clean seas. So that's about pollution from all sources. A next one was that everyone feels empowered to participate. And then there was another one from a different person, which was that local stakeholders govern. And there was a suggestion there, which I confess I vigorously opposed, which was that iwi should not be part of that governance. There was a further one, which was that there should be a reduction in recreational catch and possibly a reduction in commercial catch, but that was in square brackets. More fisheries officers and boat ramps, especially at the peak Christmas New Year period. The issue of compliance came up several times. That there should be recreational catch monitoring and reporting. I should say that 2/3 of our table are commercial crayfish or rock lobster or whatever you like to call it, fishers. I've been challenged for saying that, but protection of biodiversity with more marine protected areas and more space for those, and that they're genuine marine protected areas, not fake ones. Fisheries managed on science, not politics. The minister is a politician. Kia ora.
It's very good. Thank you very much, Kath, for that. Now, guys, we are getting very close to the end of our time here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow you guys to continue conversing with one another, keeping that corridor going. I guess it's important to note in general, in terms of the progress of this action that we want to take as a community, we need to establish in sort of sequential order a bit of a who and a what and then a how. And today has very much been about the who and who wants to be involved in this effort going forward. Up until now, it's been a very, very small group of the likes of myself and Thomas and Sharon and Anna, who have just been kind of doing this in our spare time to hopefully educate the community and get some interest expressed in this area. Can I just ask, just based on some of the key themes that you guys have heard today around some of the vision that some of you guys have discussed, around some of the issues that you guys have discussed, around some of the actions that you guys have discussed. Kath brought up a great point about, wide stakeholder, involvement, that we need everybody sort of involved and continuing to have this conversation with one another as we go through this. So based on what we've sort of seen and heard today at your individual tables, can I just see a show of hands of who might be keen to carry this conversation forward and start to pick up some of these actions that we've kind of identified now through our wish lists and actually galvanizing these into some form of community action going forward? Yep, that's great. It's going to lighten the load off of the four of us quite significantly. So look, folks, we've left some sheets on the table there for you guys to leave contact details. If you could please fill those out if you are interested and keen on being involved in this process going forward here in your local community. Please leave that behind. We'll be in contact with you, and we can start talking about next steps and how we pick up this wish list that the attendees have left us today, and we can pick those up and actually start moving forward with those. I'll now leave it over to Thomas to close out.
Thank you very much, Evan. That was a very, very good session, I found. And I'm actually quite moved how well this went, and that we have a very, very good cross-section of our community here today who came forward to engage themselves in this process. And I hope that some people will realize this is not against anybody or not trying to put anybody out of business. To the contrary, I think we want to make sure that we as a community can work together to a shared vision for a healthy, abundant, working fishery that leaves the profits of this in this town rather than getting exported out of town. You know, I think there's a lot of it is wrong with the fisheries, how they're done in this country. A lot of it gets siphoned out by big boats, out of the town, out of Hawaii, and that's, I think, one of the things that came through quite strongly. So I think everybody who is here today, stay on, please, get yourself a drink, enjoy the food. There will be a little koha box out there, so it's not maybe all in my pocket, but we can put a bit of koha into a box there somewhere for the kai if you want to. And I very much hope that we will carry this forward as a constructive discussion for all the good people in this town that are on the water every day, the fisher people, the people who are in town, seeing every day, also the greater influx of people from out of town really to come here with their boats and fish and fish and fish. So somehow we have to get together to work towards a sustainable, healthy environment. We have lots of work to do, and we can only achieve it together. There's no two ways about that. So thank you very much for coming today, and enjoy the rest of this afternoon with us, and stay in touch and in your conversations on your tables or with everyone else if you want. Thank you. Oh, and thank you to the club. Cheers, guys. And thank you to the club to host us today. Big shout out to the kitchen for the kai. And you guys rock. And I've got to get myself a beer now. And we're going to have a slide coming up on the data projector now. While we're having our food, there is a little movie that I'll play for you. Just if you want to look at it, it's a movie from a very similar hui that went over 3 days with 70 people on Waiheke, where they got together and threshed out a community vision for Waiheke. I have a movie of this, and if Sam puts it up, then we can see this while we're enjoying our kai. Cheers, guys.
For me, the moana is a cultural thing about identity, who we are as a people. It's a huge relationship with us. You know, we're tangata whenua, but we're also tangata moana.
I've lived on Waiheke on and off for the last 35 years. We're down at the beach most days, particularly in summer.
You know, I've done so much around this island, snorkeling. You know, I've snorkeled with killer whales and dolphins and big, huge schools of kingfish.
As soon as I got here, I was drawn to the beauty, the wairua whenua, the place.
It's just so peaceful, so calming. It's a source of life for everyone, you know. It's where everyone can come together.
The ocean's like quite a big part of my life. Kind of for me, I suppose it's like a backyard as well as a training ground.
Yeah, Waiheke is unique in that you have access to so many, you know, different beautiful beaches and coastlines.
There's something special about it being an island, and that's, you know, something I still feel today.
The physical changes in the environment have been massive for me when you look at how human beings have affected the environment.
You know, what's sad for me, it's not like it once was out there.
Is the marine environment healthy? No. I've seen kinnabarns in basically every single bay or every single headland that I've swum around.
There's so much more plastic pollution and rubbish all along our Waiheke coastlines.
So we know that sediment loading is a real issue in the inner Gulf. We know that we're putting stuff in the water through stormwater and pollutants that shouldn't.
We have a critical depletion of key fish. Their environment has been spoiled.
Waihiki's marine environment needs to be restored. We know that it was a lot better in the past. We know that we can't just go back to the past. In the past, the solution has not been collaborative enough with the community. And I think that's what the issue has been in this environment.
So the Waihiki Marine Project, I think, kicked off, well, the whakapapa goes back to Hui last year with the Waihiki Collective. And it was suggested that efforts were made around the Waihiki marine space, and that was met with widespread approval. But we think we've got a good opportunity here, particularly with the community and close connection with the moana, to work together and make a difference in that space.
One of the ways that we can help the Gulf and make things change is such things as future search, which is about to happen on the island.
So the future search is sort of the culmination of all of our efforts. It's a 3-day event at which you try and get all the voices you need to have in the room. There'll be opportunities for everyone to share their experiences, their knowledge, their thoughts, their hopes, their dreams, their fears.
I think the opportunity with future search, primarily the kick-off is around relationships. From a Te Ao Māori perspective, we always kick off with relationships and looking at our connections. I think that's the basis of where everything starts. I think it's really important that we come together and keep that kōrero alive. We know that there's going to be a lot of diverse views on this stuff, but the value is in actually coming together.
And that's very much in line between community and iwi. So we have Ngāti Power working with us, hand in glove on this, which is also fantastic for the island.
Yeah, it's important to have an iwi co-led with community group because we all live here together, and it's just sensible and respectful to offer the people of the land the chance to give their knowledge forward, and as we have so much more experience having lived and breathed in this place for way longer.
Well, the Future Search is it's a methodology used to create common ground or find common ground and actions around that.
It specifically doesn't describe what the mechanisms might be or the tools. It seems to create the environment for that to be found over the period of the Future Search. So in that way, it's inclusive.
So the Future Search event is a 3-day build. So it's a set of structured dialogues that build upon each other. So then you build up the commitment to the ultimate end of action planning. So you're bringing together the whole system, in this situation, the people with diverse stakes in the future of Waihiki's marine environment. So the Waihiki Marine Project Future Search has got round about 76 people of those diverse stakes in the room. You say, wow, 76 people, how on earth are you going to get good conversation and dialogue happening? So you do that with a series of structured dialogue through small groups. And so it's been arranged that there are 2 types of groups. One are those who are stakeholders, so people who have a commonality of experience and knowledge. So in the planning for the Future Search, 9 stakes were identified. So we have mana whenua, youth, land interests, marine business, agencies, locals, conservationists, scientists, and we have fishers and boaties. Then you have what we call mixed groups, where there's a group of around about 9 or 10 people who have experience and knowledge from all those different stakes, right? So that's your 2 ways it's happening over the 3 days. And they're taken and walk on a journey over the 3 days where they explore the past, they consider the present, where are we now, they imagine the future, agree on common ground, what are the things that everybody in the room commonly agrees on, and then go into action planning. So being part of the Future Search and caring for the moana and the environment in general, we wanted to make sure that the
The accessories and products that we provided as part of the conference were sustainable, and so being a international Māori designer living locally here on Waiheke, I was the obvious choice in which to come up with something. So I decided to come up with the denim bags, which represents recycling, caring for the earth, and they're so functional. As part of the Ahu Moana team within the entire marine project, we decided that we would like to gift a mask to the project bag, so I was approached to create these. So this one is got tāmoko on it from Richard Francis, who's from the Te Arawawaka, which did actually birth in Rangihaua here on the island. And so initially my masks had kia ora written on them, so you could still get out your greeting. And then I extended into these ones, which is means te mana, and so this is what we'll be gifting to all of the attendees in the conference.
Future Search was awesome. The co-facilitation with Ngāti Paoa allowed us to come together as a community, leave our identities at the door, and actually talk to each other and listen as people, as a community. For the first time, we've got a proper beginning. This is the start.
I found it super interesting, the whole thing. The way the Future Search has been run, everybody's got a chance to say what they want to say and express what they want to express.
And the comments that we've had from others here is that it's the first time that they've actually seen locals and experts actually coming together and talking under the same roof. And just for that reason, it's just phenomenal.
I'm feeling really positively charged for the future, hearing the kōrero that's been going around the room and listening to the voices of the different sections or groups of our community. It shows a real unity.
Just the diversity of things coming up is really cool.
Yeah, this event definitely gives me hope for the future. Just the discussions we've already had so far, everybody's on the same page, or somewhat the same page of the future, and it's been awesome.
The winds blow from all points of the compass, and sooner or later you've got to sheet your sails on and head off in a particular direction, and I think what's come out of today is going to help the project do that. So the next step is to regroup and to dissect the data and the comments and record it, produce a report that we can share with the community, and really getting their input and adding it to the last 3 days and moving forward with that. There is some fairly high aspirations and some quite a lot of work to do, but I think the building blocks are there for those who can gather around the project and take it forward.
The issues around Waiheke, that's a result of the loss of connection to our taia or to our environment as humans. So we need to reconnect with that stuff. But to start with, we actually need to connect with each other first to do this together.